mitigate adverse environmental impacts. Your programs should be geared to enrich communities and the people in those communities, and not just frustrate communities and the populations that live there. Okay, the planning and NEPA process. Yes, NEPA is a process and we have to follow it. And so I'd like to just review the process with you quickly. Number one, planning and programming is becoming a very important aspect of initiating NEPA. You really have to have your projects and programs on the long-range plans, either be it the statewide plan or the metropolitan plans, and you have to have them programmed on the statewide transportation improvement program or the TIP, the transportation improvement program that is managed by the MPOs. And you have to have realistic cost estimates, year of expenditure cost estimates built into those entries into the plans and programs. Need and purpose in Texas, purpose and need everywhere else in the country. So, need and purpose in Texas. Really, it's the foundation of the NEPA decision-making process. It allows you to evaluate alternatives to determine if they're reasonable or not. And it really is a group of problem statements that may lead to goals and objectives to be accomplished by the project. The affected environment. This is one of the things that was talked about in Washington D.C. and is practiced someplace else in the United States called Pennsylvania. It's to put the affected environment ahead of the alternative section, because the affected environment tells the story of what's important to the project area and what resources are important to developing alternatives. So it's important to know that information before you develop alternatives. And so that's one of the things that was talked about in Washington, mandating that you consider the affected environment before you even contemplate alternatives. And then the alternatives section really needs to tell the story of what potential solutions were originally considered, and how you screen those down to either the proposed action or the reasonable alternatives to be evaluated in an EIS. So it should tell a story of what you originally considered, the broad range of things that could be considered, and then how you screen them down. Then the impact analysis really needs to focus on your methods and your results, and then ultimately concluding with how you're going to mitigate for adverse effects. Make sure you disclose your beneficial effects and your adverse effects. They're both important to the evaluation process. Then make sure your mitigation commitments are clear, ultimately in your record of decision or in your FONSI, because you're obligated to implement those mitigation commitments. And I'm going to say enhancements as well. Don't forget about enhancements. FHWA will compensate for project enhancements. And finally, the decision is either categorical exclusion, finding no significant impact, or a record of decision. And then NEPA does not end with that. Post-NEPA activities are carried forward into design right-of-way and PS&E and construction when you implement your mitigation commitments and monitor those commitments to make sure that they are fulfilled and that they work. Okay, typically, on average, the NEPA process, project development process, takes 4 to 6 years. There are many that are over 10 years old. Many NOIs in the United States are over 10 years old right now. And FHWA is in the process of going through what's on the books and taking anything that's more than 10 years old off the books. They're actively doing this right now. As you can see, the trend line since the 1970s has been up. Typically, this is for CEs, EAs, and EISs. On average, the NEPA process takes 6 years now. That means there's a lot of EISs that bend the trend line to be over 6 years, And those EISs are taking a lot longer than 6 years. And FHWA is very concerned about this. And they're trying to take action. What ultimately comes out of that action, I don't know. But they're trying to take action and come up with strategies to deal with this trend line. EA timeframes. In 1999, it took about 1.5 years, 18 months to complete an EA. When there's no delays, it may take 14 months. When there are delays, it can take over 3 years to complete an EA. And what was the original intent of an EA? Or what was the original size of the EA supposed to be? Does anyone remember?
15 pages.
15 pages. What has happened? All right, let me catch up here. Okay. So, what are the principal causes for NEPA delay? It's not what you think. Well, maybe it is. Okay. 62% of the reported delay. This is a research study conducted in 2006, and the source is still, and the TRB paper is 062300. And you could go to the TRB website and actually pull up this paper. And it's an excellent paper, and it was supported by FHWA. The lack of funding, local controversy, low priority, and project complexity are the main contributors to project delay. 62% of the delay reported as part of this research was related to those 4 things. A small percentage of delay is associated with the things that you typically think: wetlands, hazardous waste, stream impacts, impacts to communities. It's not that at all. This is a very fascinating result of the research. They surveyed environmental stakeholders and the transportation stakeholders. For the environmental stakeholders, they believe 70% believe that state departments of transportation do not consider impacts early enough. 64% of the environmental stakeholders believe that state departments of transportation do not include important stakeholders early enough. 6 of the transportation stakeholders, 69% of the state departments of transportation federal resource agencies lack sufficient staff. So a larger percentage of the DOTs think that the resource agencies lack sufficient staff to review their projects. And I guess that's what I hear all over the country. This is great. 4F, I'm going to skip that because 4F was dealt with quite a bit with the safety loop. And so this is pre-safety loop. So I'm going to skip down to the last item there. None of the surveyed environmental stakeholders believe that requirements for obtaining wetland permits are time-consuming. Not one. Although 56% of the state DOTs, or transportation stakeholders, thought that the 404 permitting process was time-consuming. So, what do we take from this? What we take from that is that the conditions that most of the delay is associated with, you have no control over. Basically, the NEPA practitioner and the lead agency has no control over low project priority within the politics of project development, or the lack of funding, or local controversy, or project complexity. The project is what it is. It's complex, or it might have controversy because it is controversial. The lead agency and the NEPA practitioner really can't influence those. So what are we left with? The premise that we can reduce delay, it's really out of our control. There has to be draconian changes in law and policy at the congressional level or within the cabinet level before any real changes in